Today, we're going to unravel a concept that is, and I'm not exaggerating here, the absolute bedrock of our justice system. It's the principle that protects every single one of us from the immense power of the state. Okay, so let's get right into it. We've all heard this phrase a million times, right? Innocent until proven guilty. But it's so much more than just a saying. It's a really powerful legal principle that's built on two essential pillars. These pillars decide who has to prove a case and just how convincingly they have to do it. All right, so first up, we have to talk about the burden of proof. This answers the most basic question you could ask in any case. Who's the one that has to do all the proving? It's actually pretty simple when you break it down. You see, when the state charges someone with a crime, they're making a claim, a positive claim. And just like in any argument, if you're the one making the claim, the burden, or the onus, as they say in law, is on you to back it up with evidence. And this is absolutely crucial. The person who's been accused, they don't have to prove they didn't do it. They don't have to prove a single thing. The entire job, the whole responsibility, rests on the prosecution's shoulders to build the case against them from the ground up. Now, this is where things get a little more nuanced and pretty interesting. The prosecution has the main legal burden, right? That's their big mission, convince the jury. But then you have this other thing, the evidential burden. Think of it like a smaller hurdle. For any specific point the prosecution wants to make, they just have to bring enough evidence to the table to make it a live issue. Basically, something the jury actually has to stop and seriously consider. Okay, so let's move on to that second pillar. Because, it's not enough to know who has to do the proving. That's only half the story. We also need to know how convincing they have to be. And that's what we call the standard of proof. Think of it like a high jump bar. The prosecution has to clear it to win their case. And in criminal law, where a person's freedom is literally on the line, that bar is set incredibly high, like really, really high. And you can see just how different the stakes are right here. Look at a civil case, which is usually about money. There, you just need to tip the scales a little bit. It's called a balance of probabilities. But for a criminal case, whoa, it's a whole different ballgame. The prosecution has to leave the jury with no reasonable doubt. The jury has to be well and truly sure. Just look at this difference. A civil case just has to kind of hop over that 50% line. But the criminal standard, that's not a hop, that's a mountain climb. The prosecution has to get the jury to a level of certainty that is almost total. It's a deliberately steep hill, and it was designed that way specifically to protect the accused. So where did all this come from? Well, these principles weren't just thought up in a committee somewhere. They were actually forged in the fire of a really dramatic and tragic case from 1935 that completely changed the game for modern criminal law. The story itself is just incredibly sad. You have this man, Reginald Wilmington, and he's trying to win back his wife, so he goes to her mother's house with a shotgun. Now, his story was that he was just going to threaten to end his own life. But in the middle of it all, there was a struggle, and the gun went off by accident, killing her. But here is where the legal system got it wrong big time. The judge at the trial basically told the jury, look, the prosecution proved Wilmington killed her, so the burden now shifts to him to prove it was an accident. This completely flipped the idea of innocent until proven guilty right on its head. Thankfully, the case didn't end there. It went all the way up to the House of Lords, and they took one look at the trial judge's instructions and decisively rejected them. They made a landmark ruling that set the record straight. The burden of proof is always on the prosecution, from the very beginning to the very end. It never, ever shifts. And out of that ruling came this powerful, incredibly famous statement. Viscount Sankey's words about this golden thread have since become the single most important description of the prosecution's job in all of criminal law. So why are we talking about some old case? Why does this matter to you and me today? Well, because this golden thread isn't just some dusty legal theory. It's a real practical shield that protects every single one of us from the massive power of the state. You see, it all works together like this amazing three-part defense system. First, you start as innocent. That's the default setting. Second, the state has to do all the work to build the entire case against you. And third, they have to climb that incredibly high mountain we talked about, proving their case to a point near certainty. It makes it really, really hard for the state to lock its citizens up. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Just imagine how different our society would be if the state didn't have to carry that heavy burden. So the next time you hear someone say, innocent until proven guilty, you'll know. You'll know about the incredible legal history and the powerful shield that stands behind those 4 simple words.